Did they know the powder on their face was slowly poisoning their blood? Did they understand the drops that made their eyes sparkle could one day lead to blindness? When they pulled their corset strings, crushing their ribs for a smaller waist, did they feel beautiful or just breathless? What price was a queen, an empress, a woman of the highest standing, willing to pay for a beauty that was as demanding as it was deadly? The things they did for beauty in the Victorian era were not just strange. They were a daily struggle against nature and often against their own bodies. Number 19 was eating poison, really the secret to a perfect complexion. Some women in the 19th century ate arsenic every single day. They bought it in the form of little wafers, often sold as complexion wafers. The makers of these products suggested a dose just below the amount that would kill you. If a woman tried to stop taking her daily arsenic, her skin would break out in sores and she would feel terribly ill, forcing her back onto the poison. You might think beauty trends today are extreme, but few of them involve deliberately ingesting a well-known poison. In the Victorian era, one of the most sought-after beauty standards was a pale, almost translucent complexion. A tan meant you worked in the fields. It was a sign of a lower class. Aristocratic women, especially royals, wanted to look delicate, as if they never saw the sun. They wanted a complexion that looked soft, luminous, and ethereal, and some were willing to use arsenic to get it. It was sold openly. You could walk into a chemist shop and buy Dr. Mackenzie's arsenic complexion wafers or Dr. Campbell's arsenic complexion lozenges. The marketing was clever. It promised to clear up pimples, freckles, and blemishes, leaving behind flawless, pearly skin. The idea, though scientifically flawed, was that the arsenic would work from the inside out, purifying the blood and creating a perfect surface. What arsenic actually does is destroy red blood cells. This leads to anemia, which in turn makes the skin look pale. So, in a way, it worked. It produced the desired pallor, but the effect was not one of healthy radiance. It was the paleness of sickness. The luminous quality it was said to impart was actually a symptom of the body slowly breaking down. The women who took these arsenic wafers were playing a very dangerous game. Arsenic is a cumulative poison. It doesn't just pass through the body, it builds up in the tissues, in the hair, and in the nails. Over time, the side effects would become more pronounced. Users might develop a goiter, a swelling in the neck. They could experience hair loss. Their skin might develop a strange bronze or gray discoloration, the exact opposite of the desired effect. Internally, it was wreaking havoc on their organs, leading to nerve damage, kidney failure, and an increased risk of cancer. And it was addictive. The body would grow accustomed to the low-level poisoning. If a woman decided to stop, she would experience withdrawal. The symptoms were awful. Nausea, vomiting, and painful skin eruptions would appear. Her complexion, which she had worked so hard to perfect, would be ruined. This often drove women right back to the poison, creating a cycle of dependency that was nearly impossible to break. While we don't have concrete proof that Queen Victoria or Empress Elizabeth of Austria personally ate arsenic wafers, this practice was widespread in the upper echelons of society they inhabited. The pressure to conform to this ideal of ghostly paleness was immense. It was the look of the time, and arsenic was a shortcut, a potent secret whispered among ladies in their drawing rooms. The danger was part of its mystique. It was an extreme measure for an extreme ideal. Today we have countless safe ways to achieve an even skin tone. We use serums with vitamin C to brighten niacinamide, to reduce redness, and most importantly, sunscreen to prevent sun damage in the first place. We seek a healthy glow, not a sickly pallor. The story of arsenic eaters is a stark look at how a single beauty standard, when taken to its extreme, could convince people that a daily dose of poison was a perfectly reasonable part of their self-care routine. It makes you grateful for a simple bottle of moisturizer, something designed to help your skin, not slowly destroy your body from the inside. Number 18, why did women paint their faces with lead? For over 2,000 years, a popular cosmetic called Venetian ceruse was made from mixing vinegar with lead. It created a thick, white paint that covered all imperfections. It also caused lead poisoning, which led to hair loss, tooth decay, muscle paralysis, and eventually a slow, painful death. Queen Elizabeth, I was a famous user, and her mask of youth was likely a mask of poison. The Victorian era inherited this toxic tradition. While Queen Victoria herself preferred a more natural look, the use of lead-based powders and paints was still common, especially in the earlier part of her reign and in theatrical circles. The desire for a perfectly white, smooth, doll-like face was still very much alive. A product called Laird's Bloom of Youth was a popular choice. It promised a delicate, youthful complexion. What the label didn't mention was that it was a toxic cocktail of lead carbonate and acetate. Imagine applying a thin layer of poison to your face every morning. That's what these women were doing. The lead would be absorbed directly through the skin and into the bloodstream. At first, it seemed to work wonders. Ceruse was opaque. It could cover smallpox scars, freckles, and any other flaw that marred the perfection of the skin. It created a smooth, matte, almost porcelain-like finish that was highly prized, but the price was steep. Lead poisoning is insidious. The symptoms start small. A woman might feel fatigued or irritable. She might have trouble sleeping or experience digestive problems. She would likely blame it on anything but her trusty face powder. As the lead built up in her body, the problems would get worse. Her hair would start to fall out. Her gums would develop a distinct blue line, a telltale sign of chronic lead poisoning. Her teeth would rot and fall out. The most tragic part was the damage it did to the skin it was meant to beautify. Long-term use of lead cosmetics would dry out the skin, causing it to wrinkle and shrivel. It would leave a gray, discolored-looking complexion. To hide this damage, the woman would apply even more of the lead-based paint. She became trapped in a vicious cycle, using the poison to cover up the damage the poison itself was causing. The effects on the rest of the body were even more devastating. Lead attacks the nervous system. Users could experience tremors, muscle paralysis, and a condition known as wrist drop, where they could no longer lift their hands. It damaged the brain, leading to memory loss and cognitive decline. And it was often fatal. Empress Eugenie of France, wife of Napoleon III, was a fashion icon of her time. The trends she set in Paris were copied across Europe. While she was known for her elegance, the court she presided over was one of opulence and artifice. The pressure to maintain a flawless appearance was immense. Women in her circle would have certainly used these kinds of powders to achieve the perfect aristocratic look. They were slowly poisoning themselves for the sake of fashion, for a place at court. Think about that for a moment. The very thing they used to make themselves look beautiful and youthful was actively aging them and destroying their health. They were sacrificing their future for a fleeting, fashionable appearance. When we use foundation or concealer today, the ingredients are regulated and tested for safety. We have powders made from rice, cornstarch, or finely milled minerals. They are designed to be non-toxic and often contain beneficial ingredients like hyaluronic acid or SPF. We no longer have to choose between covering a blemish and preserving our long-term health. The story of lead makeup is a chilling example of how beauty, untempered by science and safety, can become a deadly pursuit. It makes you appreciate the rigorous testing and regulations that keep our modern makeup safe. Number 17, could your eye drops really make you go blind? As Victorian women put drops of a poisonous plant extract into their eyes to make their pupils dilate. The plant was called Atropa belladonna, which translates to beautiful lady. The large, dark pupils were considered alluring and mysterious. The drops also blurred their vision, made them sensitive to light, and with long-term use could cause permanent blindness. The eyes were considered the windows to the soul in the Victorian era. A woman's gaze was supposed to be soft, emotive, and captivating. To enhance this, some women turned to a very risky beauty hack, belladonna. This wasn't a secret. Tincture of belladonna could be purchased from a chemist. It was used as a cosmetic, a way to make the eyes appear larger, darker, and more luminous. The science is simple. Belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade, contains atropine. Atropine is a chemical that blocks the receptors in the muscles of the eye that control the constriction of the pupil. When these muscles are temporarily paralyzed, the pupil opens wide and stays that way for hours. This is the same reason an ophthalmologist uses drops to dilate your eyes for an exam. But ophthalmologists know the correct dosage and use it in a controlled environment. Victorian women were just guessing. A few drops would create the desired effect. A woman's eyes would suddenly look huge and deep, like dark pools. This was considered the height of romantic beauty. It gave them a look of wide-eyed innocence mixed with a hint of mystery. But this beauty came with immediate and significant drawbacks. With their pupils fixed in a dilated state, their eyes could no longer adjust to bright light. A walk outside on a sunny day would be painful. A brightly lit ballroom would be a challenge. Everything would seem glaringly, uncomfortably bright. Their vision would also become blurry, especially up close. Reading a letter, doing fine needlework, or even recognizing a face across the room could become difficult. These women were trading their clear sight for a fashionable gaze. The long-term risks were far worse. Repeated use of belladonna could lead to an increased risk of glaucoma, a condition that damages the optic nerve and causes vision loss. It could cause chronic dry eye and inflammation, and in some cases, it could contribute to permanent blindness. They were risking their ability to see the world for the sake of how the world saw them. This practice was particularly popular in the more fashion-conscious courts of Europe, like that of Empress Eugenie in Paris. Appearance was everything, and a captivating gaze could be a powerful social tool. The risk seemed a small price to pay for an evening of looking enchanting. There's a sad irony in it all. They wanted their eyes to look more beautiful and expressive, but the very substance they used robbed them of the ability to see clearly. They created a beautiful window, but fogged up the view from the inside. Today, we achieve a similar effect with much safer methods. We use eyeliner and mascara to define the eyes and make them appear larger. We use shimmering eyeshadows to create a luminous effect. We have contact lenses that can change eye color. None of these things require us to put a known poison directly into our eyes. The thought of deliberately blurring our own vision for a cosmetic effect seems absurd to us now. It's a powerful reminder that the safest beauty products are the ones that enhance what's there, rather than compromising a vital human sense. Number 16. What did it mean to sleep in a mask of raw meat? Empress Elizabeth of Austria-Hungary, known as Sisi, was obsessed with her beauty. To preserve her youthful skin, she sometimes slept with a face mask made of crushed strawberries and raw veal. The mask was held in place with a custom-made leather mask that she wore to bed. She also wrapped her neck in cloth soaked in hay-infused water to keep the skin there firm. And Empress Sisi was one of the most famous beauties of the 19th century. She was known for her stunning figure, her flawless complexion, and her floor-length chestnut hair. But maintaining this image was a full-time job, and it involved some of the most bizarre and elaborate beauty routines ever recorded. Her nightly skincare was a far cry from a simple splash of water and a bit of cold cream. One of her most notorious treatments was the raw veal face mask. The idea was that the proteins and juices from the meat would be absorbed by her skin, nourishing it and preventing wrinkles. The finest cuts of veal would be sliced thinly or pounded into a pulp. Sometimes this meat paste was mixed with crushed strawberries, which were thought to have an astringent cleansing effect. This mixture would be applied all over her face. To keep this concoction in place all night, she had a special mask made of leather. It was lined with soft material and fitted her face perfectly. She would go to sleep wearing this mask of meat and leather. One can only guess at the smell and the strange sensation of cold, raw meat pressed against your skin for hours. This wasn't just a one-time experiment. It was part of a regular rotation of strange nightly treatments. Another favorite was a bath in warm olive oil, a practice she believed kept her skin supple and soft. After the bath, she would move on to her waist. She would wrap her midsection in cloths soaked in violet or cider vinegar. She believed this would help maintain her famously tiny wasp waist, which was rumored to be a mere 19.5 inches around. Her neck, another area prone to showing age, received special attention. She would wrap her neck in cloths that had been soaked in water steeped with hay. This was an old farm remedy, thought to tighten and tone the skin. Sisi's life was a testament to the pressures faced by royal women to be perfect physical specimens. Her beauty was her currency, her claim to fame. But it also became her prison. She was terrified of aging. She avoided public appearances as she got older and hid her face behind fans and veils. Her days were consumed by these strange, demanding rituals. What would a modern dermatologist say about a raw veal mask? They would likely be horrified. Raw meat is a breeding ground for bacteria. Applying it to your face for hours is an invitation for infection, breakouts, and serious skin problems. While strawberries do contain vitamin C and alpha hydroxy acids, which are used in skincare today, the benefits would be minimal compared to the risks of the raw meat. Today, we get the benefits she was seeking from safe, scientifically formulated products. We use peptide creams and retinol serums to boost collagen, a protein that keeps skin firm. We use hyaluronic acid to hydrate. We use gentle chemical exfoliants like glycolic acid, derived from sugarcane, not hay, to keep our skin smooth. Cece's routine highlights the desperation and the lack of scientific understanding in Victorian beauty. She was using a combination of folk remedies and luxurious but ultimately misguided treatments. Her story is a poignant one. She had access to unlimited wealth and resources, yet she resorted to sleeping in a meat mask. It shows how the fear of aging and the pressure to be beautiful can drive people to the most extreme and bizarre lengths. It makes you grateful for the science and safety that underpins our skincare today. Number 15, could you spend an entire day just washing your hair? An Empress Sisi of Austria-Hungary had hair that reached the floor. It was so long and thick that it gave her headaches. The process of washing it was an all-day affair. Her hairdresser would use a mixture of a dozen egg yolks and a full bottle of French cognac to cleanse the hair. After the wash, Cece would put on a long, waterproof gown and walk around until her hair dried naturally, which could take hours. For many women, hair is their crowning glory. For Empress Cece, this was literally true. Her chestnut brown hair was her most famous feature. It was a symbol of her imperial status and her legendary beauty, but maintaining this symbol was an almost Herculean task that dominated her life. The washing ritual happened roughly once every 3 weeks. It was a major event in the palace. Her personal hairdresser, Fanny Fifalik, was one of the most important people in her retinue. The day would be cleared of all other appointments. First, the concoction had to be prepared. A dozen or more fresh egg yolks were separated and whipped together with an entire bottle of high-quality French cognac. This mixture was believed to cleanse the hair while also strengthening it and giving it shine. Fanny would then spend hours meticulously working this mixture through the Empress's immense tresses. A delicate, painstaking process. After the shampoo was thoroughly applied, it had to be rinsed out, which was another massive undertaking involving pitchers and pitchers of water. The ordeal wasn't over yet. Cece refused to use heat to dry her hair, believing it would cause damage. So, after the wash, she would don a special waterproof silk gown. She would then pace back and forth in her chambers, sometimes walking on a balcony if the weather was fine, with her hair spread out over the gown to air dry. Given the sheer volume of her hair, this process could take the better part of a day. She couldn't sit down properly or do much of anything else until it was dry. The weight of her wet hair was so great that she often had to be propped up with pillows. Even on non-washing days, her hair routine was a marathon. It took Fanny Fifalik at least 3 hours every morning to brush, comb, and style the Empress's hair into its elaborate braided coronets. Cece was so particular that she would have a silver bowl placed under the brush. After the styling was complete, she would inspect the bowl for any fallen hairs. If there were too many, it would put her in a terrible mood for the rest of the day. Fanny, knowing this, would cleverly hide some of the shed hairs on a piece of tape stuck to her apron. The weight of the hair itself was a constant physical burden. Cece often complained of severe headaches. Sometimes, to relieve the pressure on her scalp, she would have her hair tied up to the ceiling with ribbons, allowing her to sit and read without the constant pulling sensation. Her hair care routine was an extreme example of how a single beauty feature could come to define and dominate a person's life. It was a source of great pride, but also of great pain and inconvenience. It required the dedication of a full day, the skill of a dedicated professional, and a high tolerance for discomfort. Compare this to our modern hair care. We have pH balanced shampoos for every hair type. We have conditioners, deep conditioning masks, and leave-in treatments. We have powerful hair dryers that can dry even long, thick hair in a matter of minutes. A hair wash is a simple part of our daily or weekly routine, not a monumental day-long event. Cece's hair ritual is a fascinating look at the intersection of luxury, obsession, and the absence of modern convenience. She used eggs and brandy because that's what was available. She spent a day on it because she had no other choice. It makes you appreciate the simple, effective science in a modern bottle of shampoo and the freedom that comes with not being a slave to your own hair. Number 14 was a tiny waist worth a warped skeleton. Victorian women wore corsets that could reduce their waist size by several inches, creating the fashionable hourglass figure. The ideal waist size was considered to be between 16 and 18 inches. To achieve this, women would tight lace, pulling the corset strings so tight that it restricted their breathing, displaced their internal organs, and over time could permanently deform their rib cage. The corset was not just an undergarment in the Victorian era, it was an essential piece of a woman's wardrobe, as fundamental as a pair of shoes. From a young age, girls were put into corsets to train their figures. By the time they were adults, their bodies were accustomed to the rigid structure. But the fashion for the wasp waist in the mid to late Victorian period took this practice to a dangerous extreme. A typical corset was made of stiff cloth, reinforced with strips of whalebone baleen or steel. It had laces in the back that could be pulled incredibly tight. The goal was to cinch the waist to the smallest possible circumference while pushing the bust up and out. This created a dramatic, almost unnatural silhouette that was considered the height of femininity and high fashion. The immediate effects were obvious. It was difficult to breathe deeply. The diaphragm couldn't expand properly, forcing women to take shallow breaths from the upper chest. This is why fainting couches were a common piece of furniture in Victorian homes. A woman might swoon from a lack of oxygen, especially if she was in a crowded, stuffy room or experienced a moment of shock or excitement. But the long-term damage was far more severe. The constant pressure on the torso would literally reshape a woman's body. The lower ribs could be squeezed together and bent inward, permanently altering the shape of the skeleton. Internally, things were even worse. The organs in the abdomen, the stomach, liver, and intestines were compressed and pushed downwards. The kidneys could be displaced. This constant pressure could lead to a host of health problems, including chronic indigestion, constipation, and uterine prolapse. Empress Cece of Austria-Hungary was famous for her dedication to tight lacing. Her 19.5-inch waist was a core component of her celebrated beauty. She would have her corsets custom made in Paris and would undergo the grueling process of being laced into them every morning. This, combined with her extreme exercise routines and restrictive diets, was all part of her relentless pursuit of a perfect figure. She was, in effect, treating her own body like a piece of clay to be molded and shaped according to the dictates of fashion. The practice was not without its critics, even at the time. Doctors wrote articles and pamphlets warning of the health dangers of tight lacing. The dress reform movement advocated for looser, more natural clothing for women, but for many, especially in the upper classes, the social pressure to conform to the fashionable silhouette was stronger than any health warning. A tiny waist was a sign of discipline, refinement, and social standing. It showed that you were a lady of leisure, not someone who needed to bend or breathe freely for physical labor. Today, we look back at the practice of tight lacing with a mixture of fascination and horror. The idea of deliberately deforming your own skeleton for fashion seems barbaric. While shapewear still exists, it is designed to smooth and support, not to fundamentally alter the body's structure. Modern fashion, for the most part, emphasizes comfort and freedom of movement. The Victorian corset is a powerful example of how beauty standards can demand a literal physical sacrifice. It was a routine of constriction and control, one that prioritized an external artificial shape over the internal health and proper functioning of the body. It makes you grateful for the simple freedom of being able to take a deep breath. Number 13, how could you clean your face without soap and water? Many Victorian women especially in the upper classes, believed that water was bad for the skin. They thought it was too harsh, would enlarge pores, and could even carry diseases. Instead of washing their faces with water, they would cleanse them with cold cream, which they would apply and then wipe off. Sometimes they would follow this with a splash of floral water, but plain water was often avoided. We think of washing our face as the most basic step in skincare. But in the 19th century, things were very different. The quality of water, especially in large industrializing cities like London, was often poor. It could be contaminated and dirty. This led to a genuine fear of waterborne illnesses like cholera. This fear extended to beauty routines. The belief took hold that water was an enemy of a delicate complexion. It was seen as something that would strip the skin of its natural oils, leaving it dry and coarse. Pores, it was thought, would be opened and enlarged by contact with water, making the skin look less refined. So, many aristocratic women simply stopped washing their faces in the way we do today. Their cleansing routine revolved around creams and oils. The most common product was cold cream. A typical recipe for cold cream included almond oil, beeswax, and rose water. A woman would massage this thick, oily cream all over her face. The idea was that the oil would dissolve the dirt, grime, and any powder or makeup she was wearing. Then, she would take a soft cloth and carefully wipe it all away. This was often the entire cleansing process. No rinsing. A thin film of the oily cream would be left behind on the skin, which was thought to act as a moisturizer and a protective barrier. Sometimes, for a feeling of freshness, a woman might pat her face with a cloth dipped in rose water or orange blossom water. But the idea of a vigorous scrub with soap and water was considered unsophisticated and damaging. This dry cleansing method had its problems. While it might have been gentler than using the harsh lye-based soaps of the era, it's unlikely that it ever truly got the face clean. Wiping away the cream would remove some surface dirt, but it would also smear the grime around and leave a residue that could clog pores. This could lead to breakouts and a dull, congested complexion. Queen Victoria was actually something of an exception to this trend. She was a great believer in cleanliness and hygiene. She was a proponent of using carbolic soap, an early antiseptic soap, for personal hygiene. But in the more fashion-driven circles of European royalty, the no water rule was a sign of refinement. Empress Eugenie, for example, was known for her meticulous and gentle beauty routines, which likely would have included cleansing with creams rather than water. The irony is that they were avoiding water to protect their skin, but their method was likely contributing to skin problems. They were layering creams and powders on top of skin that was never properly cleansed. Today, our understanding of skin cleansing is much more advanced. We know that water is essential. We have developed gentle pH balance cleansers that effectively remove dirt, oil, and makeup without stripping the skin's natural moisture barrier. We have a whole category of products: micellar waters, cleansing balms, foaming cleansers, gel cleansers, all designed to work with water to get the skin truly clean. The Victorian practice of cream cleansing is a fascinating glimpse into a time when fear and misinformation shaped beauty routines. It shows how even the most fundamental aspects of self-care can be influenced by the trends and beliefs of the era. It makes you appreciate the simple, effective feeling of splashing your face with clean water and knowing you are actually helping your skin, not harming it. Number 12, why would you put ammonia on your hair? Victorian women sometimes used diluted ammonia to clean their hair and strip it of grease. It was a harsh chemical that could dry out the hair and irritate the scalp. They also used borax, another household cleaning agent, in their hair rinses. These were seen as powerful, clarifying treatments, but they were incredibly damaging. Getting truly clean hair in the Victorian era was a challenge. Soaps were often harsh and left a scummy residue, especially in hard water. This led people to seek out stronger substances to cut through the grease and product buildup. Two common household chemicals found their way into hair care routines: ammonia and borax. Ammonia is a powerful alkaline cleaning agent. You might know it as a component of window cleaner or floor stripper. Its ability to cut through grease was undeniable. Some Victorian beauty guides recommended adding a small amount of ammonia to the water used for washing hair. It would work as a potent clarifying agent, stripping away all the natural oil sebum from the scalp and hair strands, along with any dirt. The result would be hair that felt squeaky clean. But this came at a cost. Ammonia is extremely harsh. It would strip the hair so thoroughly that it would be left dry, brittle, and prone to breakage. The high alkalinity of ammonia would also raise the cuticle of the hair shaft, making it rough and dull. It could also cause significant irritation to the scalp, leading to redness, itching, and flaking. It was a short-term solution with long-term negative consequences. Borax, another household powder used for laundry and cleaning, was also used in hair care. It was often dissolved in water and used as a final rinse. Borax would help to soften hard water, which allowed soap to rinse out more cleanly. It was also believed to make the hair soft and shiny. However, like ammonia, borax is a harsh alkaline substance. It could be very drying and irritating to the scalp and hair over time. These practices were born out of a lack of better options. Women were trying to solve a real problem: greasy, dull hair with product residue, using the most powerful cleaning agents they had available. They didn't have access to the sophisticated chemistry of modern shampoos. They didn't understand the importance of pH balance for hair and scalp health. Imagine the smell of washing your hair with ammonia. It's a sharp, unpleasant odor, and the feeling of such a harsh chemical on your scalp must have been uncomfortable. Yet, for the promise of clean, shiny hair, these were risks some women were willing to take. This would have been a more common practice among the general population than royalty, who had access to expensive hairdressers and imported products like French cognac. However, the underlying principle was the same: a search for effective cleansers in an era before modern cosmetic science. Today, our approach is completely different. We have clarifying shampoos that are specially formulated to remove buildup without being overly harsh. They use gentle surfactants and often include ingredients to soothe the scalp and moisturize the hair. We use chelating agents to counteract the effects of hard water minerals. We understand that healthy hair is not squeaky clean hair. It's hair that has its natural moisture balance intact. The use of ammonia and borax on hair is a stark reminder of how far hair care has come. It was a desperate measure from a time when the line between personal care products and household cleaning agents was blurry. It makes you grateful for the carefully formulated, pH balanced, and safe products we have today, which can give us clean, healthy hair without resorting to floor cleaner. Number 11, was it fashionable to look sick? One of the most pervasive beauty ideals of the mid-Victorian era was the consumptive look. Tuberculosis, then known as consumption, was rampant and often romanticized in art and literature. This led to a beauty trend where women tried to emulate the symptoms of the disease: pale skin, flushed cheeks, large, luminous eyes, and a general air of delicate frailty. This is perhaps one of the strangest and most unsettling beauty trends in history. A devastating, fatal disease became a fashion statement. Consumption was a leading cause of death in the 19th century. It was a slow, wasting illness, and its victims often took on a specific appearance in the early stages. The disease could cause a low-grade fever, which would result in bright, flushed cheeks and sparkling, feverish eyes. The loss of appetite and weight would lead to a slender, ethereal frame. The skin would become pale and translucent. In a strange cultural twist, this look became idealized. It was seen as a sign of sensitivity, refinement, and spiritual depth. A woman who looked consumptive was seen as tragically beautiful, too delicate for this world. This ideal was reinforced by popular novels and poems of the time, where heroines would often fade away beautifully from the disease. So, healthy women began to use beauty routines to mimic the appearance of being sick. To get the pale skin, they would use the lead and arsenic-based powders we've already discussed. They would also go to great lengths to avoid the sun, carrying parasols, and wearing bonnets and veils to protect their skin from any hint of a healthy tan. To get the flushed cheeks, they would use rouge, but they would apply it very specifically just on the apples of the cheeks to mimic the hectic flush of a fever. Some women would even resort to pinching their cheeks hard before entering a room to bring a rush of blood to the surface. To get the large, luminous eyes, they would use belladonna drops The feverish, dilated pupils created by the poison perfectly matched the consumptive ideal. And to achieve the frail, slender body, they would use restrictive corsetry and often adhere to very limited diets. A hearty appetite was considered unladylike. A delicate, bird-like appetite was more in keeping with the frail ideal. This trend put women in a strange position. On the one hand, they were terrified of actually contracting tuberculosis. On the other hand, they were actively trying to look like they had it. It was a dangerous game of aesthetics, where the line between looking fashionably ill and being terminally ill was uncomfortably thin. This ideal would have influenced the highest levels of society, while a queen or empress would not want to appear genuinely unwell. The overall aesthetic of paleness, large eyes, and a delicate frame was the dominant standard of beauty they were all judged by. Empress Sisi, with her extreme thinness and pale complexion, certainly fit the mold, even though her appearance was achieved through obsessive exercise and diet, not illness. Today, our beauty ideals are the polar opposite. We strive for a look of health and vitality. We want glowing skin, a strong and fit body, and clear, bright eyes. We associate a tan, a safe, sunless one with health and leisure. The idea of wanting to look sick is completely alien to our modern sensibilities. We spend billions on vitamins, health foods, and gym memberships to look and feel as healthy as possible. The consumptive look is a powerful example of how culture can shape beauty in the most bizarre ways. It was a time when sickness was romanticized, and women would use poison, constriction, and starvation to achieve a look that, to our eyes, is simply a picture of poor health. It makes you grateful for a modern culture that, for all its own problematic beauty standards, at least equates beauty with health, not with disease. Number 10. How did you make eyebrows without an eyebrow pencil? In the Victorian era, there were no commercial eyebrow pencils as we know them. To darken their eyebrows and eyelashes, women would use simple, often homemade, materials. A common method was to use the soot from a burnt cork, a burnt matchstick, or a candle. They would collect the black powder and mix it with a bit of oil or pomade to create a paste, which they would then apply with a small brush. The Victorian era had a complex relationship with makeup, right? For respectable ladies, obvious makeup was a sign of immorality or theatricality. The goal was to look naturally beautiful, as if you just woke up that way. However, this natural look often required a good deal of secret artifice. Enhancing the eyebrows and eyelashes was one of the more acceptable forms of cosmetic enhancement, as long as it was done subtly. Without a conveniently packaged pencil from a beauty store, women had to get creative. The DIY approach was the most common. A woman might hold a cork over a candle flame until it was charred and black. Once it cooled, she could either rub the cork directly on her brows or scrape off the soot. This soot was a fine carbon powder, very similar to the carbon black used in mascaras and eyeliners today. So, to make it easier to apply and to give it some staying power, she would mix this soot with a binder, a little bit of petroleum jelly, which became widely available in the latter half of the century. A dab of castor oil or beeswax-based pomade would work. This would create a crude but effective eyebrow pomade or mascara. She could then use a tiny brush, like a camel hair paintbrush, to carefully apply it to her brows, filling in any sparse areas and defining the shape. The same mixture could be used on the eyelashes to make them appear darker and thicker. Another method involved using elderberry juice. The dark purple juice of the elderberry could be used as a temporary stain for the brows and lashes. Some beauty recipes also suggested using a mixture of frankincense, resin, and soot, which would be heated and applied. These methods were not without their risks. Using soot from a candle or a match meant you were putting potentially irritating combustion byproducts near your eyes. If you weren't careful, you could get soot particles in your eye, which could cause irritation or infection. And the binders, like pomade, could be heavy and pore clogging. Queen Alexandra, the wife of King Edward VII and daughter-in-law of Queen Victoria, was a celebrated beauty and fashion icon in the late Victorian and Edwardian eras. She was known for her elegant style, and photographs show that she had well-defined eyes and brows. It is highly likely that she and the ladies in her court would have used these subtle techniques to enhance their features. The key was discretion. The goal was to look enhanced, not painted. This DIY approach to eye makeup highlights the resourcefulness of Victorian women. They used what they had on hand to achieve a desired look, but it also shows how inconvenient and imprecise their methods were. Imagine trying to get a perfectly even application using a burnt cork and some Vaseline. Today, we have an almost overwhelming array of products for our eyebrows alone. We have pencils, powders, gels, pomades, waxes, and tinted mascaras in every conceivable shade. They are formulated with safe, skin-friendly ingredients. They are easy to apply and designed for long-lasting wear. We can achieve anything from a supernatural look to a bold, dramatic brow with precision and ease. The story of Victorian eyebrow makeup is a humble one. It's not as shocking as arsenic or lead, but it's a telling detail about the daily realities of their beauty routines. It makes you appreciate the convenience, safety, and artistry that modern cosmetics offer. The simple act of swiping an eyebrow pencil through your brows is a luxury they couldn't have imagined. Number 9. What was the secret to kiss-proof lip color? Obvious lip color was considered vulgar for most of the Victorian era, but women still sought a subtle, healthy-looking flush. One dangerous method was to use products containing carmine, a red pigment made from crushed cochineal beetles. While the beetles themselves are harmless, the carmine was often mixed with other chemicals, like antimony, which is toxic. Another method was to bite your lips frequently, to make them temporarily red and plump. The Victorian ideal of beauty emphasized a natural look. A painted Cupid's bow was associated with actresses and prostitutes, not with respectable ladies. However, pale, colorless lips were not desirable either. The goal was a subtle, rosebud-like pout that looked naturally flushed with health. Achieving this without looking painted required some clever and sometimes painful techniques. One of the oldest and most common methods was simply to bite your lips. Before entering a social gathering, a woman might discreetly bite her lips to stimulate blood flow, causing them to swell slightly and turn a darker shade of red. This effect was, of course, very temporary and would have to be repeated throughout the evening. Some women also used a rough cloth to rub their lips vigorously for a similar effect. For those who wanted something a bit more lasting, there were lip stains and salves. These were not like modern lipsticks. They were designed to give a sheer tint, not an opaque color. A popular ingredient for these stains was carmine. Carmine is a vibrant red pigment derived from cochineal insects, which are a type of scale insect that lives on cacti. The insects are harvested, dried, and crushed to produce the dye. Carmine itself is still used in food and cosmetics today and is generally safe. The problem in the Victorian era was a lack of regulation and purity. The carmine pigment was often mixed with fillers and other substances to make it cheaper or to alter the shade. One of the more dangerous additives was antimony cinnabar. Antimony is a toxic heavy metal. When absorbed through the skin of the lips or ingested, it can cause symptoms similar to arsenic poisoning. So, a woman trying to achieve a subtle, healthy lip color could have been slowly poisoning herself. Other recipes for lip tints involved plant-based ingredients. The root of the alkanet plant, for example, could be infused in oil or alcohol to create a red dye. Crushed geranium petals were also used to impart a rosy hue to lip salves. These were safer, but their color was often less vibrant and less lasting than the carmine-based products. These products would be packaged in small tins or pots. A woman would apply a tiny amount with her fingertip, blotting it carefully so that it looked like her lips were naturally that color. The application had to be invisible. Towards the very end of the Victorian era, the attitude towards makeup began to shift. The first commercial lipsticks sold in paper tubes began to appear in the 1880s, pioneered by French perfumers. But for most of Queen Victoria's reign, the emphasis was on this secret, subtle enhancement. The routines of biting and rubbing lips and the careful, discreet application of potentially toxic salves speak volumes about the social constraints on women. They were expected to be beautiful, but not to be seen trying. Their beauty was supposed to be an innate quality, not something that came out of a pot. Compare this to our world of makeup. We have matte lipsticks, satin lipsticks, glosses, stains, and liquid lipsticks in thousands of shades. We celebrate bold lip colors. We watch tutorials on how to create the perfect lip line. The idea of hiding the fact that you're wearing lip color is completely foreign. We are also protected by regulations that ensure the pigments used in our lipstick are safe for consumption, which is important since we inevitably ingest a small amount of it. The Victorian pursuit of the perfect natural lip is a reminder of how much social norms can dictate beauty practices. It makes you grateful for the freedom to wear a bold red lip without judgment, and for the certainty that it isn't laced with heavy metals. Number 8. Why did women wear gloves filled with goop to bed? To keep their hands looking pale, soft, and youthful, some Victorian women would sleep in special gloves. Before putting on the gloves, they would slather their hands in a thick layer of a homemade moisturizing concoction. A common recipe was a mixture of beeswax, almond oil, and spermaceti, a waxy substance from the head of a sperm whale. They would wear these greasy, goopy gloves all night long. In the Victorian era, a woman's hands were a powerful indicator of her social class. Rough, tanned, or calloused hands were a sign of manual labor. The hands of a true lady were expected to be soft, white, smooth, and delicate, with perfectly shaped nails. They were a symbol that she lived a life of leisure. Maintaining these perfect ladies' hands required a dedicated and often messy nightly ritual. The core of this ritual was an intensive, overnight moisturizing treatment. Women would create their own hand creams, or pastes, using ingredients they could buy from a chemist. A typical base would be a simple oil, like almond oil or olive oil. To this, they would add beeswax to thicken it and create a protective barrier. And other popular ingredients included glycerin, which helps draw moisture into the skin, and fragrant floral waters like rose or lavender. One of the more unusual and now controversial ingredients was spermaceti. This waxy substance found in the head cavity of the sperm whale was a common ingredient in cosmetics and candles in the 18th and 19th centuries. It was prized for its smooth, silky texture and was thought to be an excellent emollient. A woman would massage a generous amount of this thick, greasy paste all over her hands and wrists. Then, to keep the mixture from getting all over her bed sheets and to help it soak in, she would put on a pair of gloves. These weren't her fancy daytime gloves. They were usually made of a soft washable material like cotton or chamois leather. She would wear these gloves all night while she slept. In the morning, she would remove the gloves and wash off any remaining residue. The result would be incredibly soft and moisturized hands. This routine, repeated regularly, would help to counteract the drying effects of the harsh soaps of the era and keep her hands in pristine condition. Beyond the nightly goop-filled gloves, hand care was a constant concern. During the day, women would wear gloves whenever they went outside to protect their hands from the sun. A tan was to be avoided at all costs. To further whiten the skin on their hands, some women would rub them with lemon juice. The citric acid in the lemon juice acts as a mild bleach and exfoliant. This obsessive focus on the hands seems extreme to us, but it was a crucial part of the overall aesthetic of the aristocratic Victorian woman. It was all part of constructing an image of delicate, leisured femininity. While the idea of sleeping in greasy gloves might seem a bit unpleasant, this is one Victorian beauty routine that has a clear modern equivalent. The practice of slugging, where people apply a thick layer of an occlusive product like petroleum jelly to their face or hands overnight, is very popular today. We also have overnight hand masks and moisturizing gloves that are infused with ingredients like shea butter and argan oil. The main difference is the ingredients. We no longer use whale byproducts in our cosmetics. We have a much wider array of safe, effective, and ethically sourced plant-based oils and butters. We also have scientifically advanced ingredients like ceramides and hyaluronic acid. The Victorian routine of the beauty glove is a great example of a practice that was based on a sound principle, long-term, occlusive, moisturizing, but was executed with the messy, limited ingredients of the time. It makes you grateful for our modern, non-greasy greasy hand creams, and the fact that we don't have to rely on whales for our skincare. Number 7. Was it necessary to scent every single thing you owned? In Victorian royals, particularly Queen Victoria, had a deep fondness for fragrances. She was particularly fond of the scent of orange blossoms. The obsession with scent went beyond just dabbing perfume on the skin. Aristocratic women would scent their gloves, their handkerchiefs, their stationery, their hair, and even the rooms of their homes. A woman's personal scent was a subtle but constant part of her presence. In an era of questionable public sanitation in crowded cities, personal fragrance was not just a luxury, it was a necessity. A beautiful scent was a way to create a personal bubble of clean, pleasant air. For the upper classes, it was also a sign of refinement and wealth. Expensive perfumes made from rare and imported floral essences were a status symbol. Queen Victoria's favorite perfumer was Creed, a brand that still exists today. They created a scent for her called Fleur de Bulgarie, but her personal signature was orange blossom. She wore it in her hair on her wedding day, and the scent became closely associated with her. The application of perfume was a delicate art. It wasn't just sprayed on. Women would use perfume atomizers, but they would also apply scents in more subtle ways. A few drops of perfume would be placed on a handkerchief. Since a lady always carried a handkerchief, this would provide a gentle waft of fragrance whenever she used it. Gloves were another key item to be scented. Leather gloves would be stored in a sachet box with perfumed powder or dried flowers. The leather would absorb the scent, so a woman's hands would be perfumed all day. Hair was also a carrier of scent. Women would use perfumed hair oils or pomades. They might also rinse their hair with floral waters. A more direct method was to spritz a hairbrush with perfume before brushing the hair. As she moved, her hair would release a subtle cloud of her chosen fragrance. Even writing paper was perfumed. A lady of high standing would have her stationery stored with scented sachets, so the letters she sent would carry her personal scent. This was considered a very intimate and elegant gesture. The home itself was part of this scentscape. Potpourri made from dried flowers and spices was placed in bowls in every room. Linens were stored in chests with lavender sachets. During social gatherings, hostesses might even have floral waters sprinkled on the carpets or curtains to scent the air. This practice was about creating a complete sensory identity. A woman's scent preceded her into a room and lingered after she left. It was an invisible part of her attire, as carefully chosen as her dress or her jewelry. Empress Eugenie was also a great patron of the French perfume industry. The House of Guerlain created a special fragrance for her, Eau de Cologne Impériale, and she made them the official perfumer to the court. Her influence helped to solidify Paris as the perfume capital of the world. While we still love perfume today, our approach is generally more direct. We apply it to our skin and perhaps our clothes. The idea of scenting our stationery seems quaint and old-fashioned. However, the concept of a signature scent is still very much alive, and the practice of scenting our homes is bigger than ever, with a huge market for scented candles, reed diffusers, and room sprays. The Victorian obsession with scenting everything was a product of their time. It was a reaction to the odors of the city, a display of wealth, and a form of personal expression. It shows a deep appreciation for the power of fragrance to shape an environment and an identity. It's a reminder that beauty and self-care are not just about what can be seen, but also about the invisible atmosphere we create around ourselves. Number 6, could you survive on a diet of broth and oranges? Empress Sisi was as obsessed with her figure as she was with her skin and hair. To maintain her incredibly slender physique, she followed extremely restrictive diets. Sometimes she would eat nothing but the broth from a stew of beef, chicken, and venison. At other times, she would subsist for days on just milk and oranges. She also drank the raw juices from steak pressings. The Victorian era was a time of contradictions when it came to food and body image. On the one hand, a plump figure could be seen as a sign of health and prosperity. On the other hand, in the aristocratic circles, a slender, delicate frame was becoming the fashionable ideal. No one embodied this ideal more extremely than Empress Sisi. Her relationship with food was deeply troubled and would, today likely be classified as a severe eating disorder. She saw food as the enemy of her beauty, something to be strictly controlled and often avoided. Her diets were not about nutrition, they were about maintaining her tiny waist and low body weight at all costs. One of her famous diets involved a meat juice concoction. She would have several pounds of beef steak pressed in a special device to extract the raw juices. She would then drink this bloody liquid as a meal. She believed it gave her strength without the bulk of actually eating the meat. Another of her extreme eating plans was the broth diet. Her chefs would prepare a rich, complex consomme by simmering multiple types of meat, beef, chicken, partridge, venison for hours. The resulting liquid would be strained and clarified. Cece would then drink this broth for her meals, sometimes for days on end, consuming no solid food at all. There were also periods where she would eat only dairy and fruit. A milk and oranges diet was one of her recurring fads. For several days, her entire caloric intake would come from these two sources. This severe restriction was coupled with a fanatical exercise regimen. She had a full gymnasium set up in her private chambers in the Hofburg Palace, complete with rings, a pommel horse, and parallel bars. She would exercise for hours every day. She was also an accomplished horsewoman and would go on grueling, hours-long rides. Her obsession with her weight was all-consuming. She was weighed up to 3 times a day, and her weight was recorded in a ledger. Any small gain would send her into a panic and trigger another round of extreme dieting. This lifestyle took a toll on her health. She likely suffered from malnutrition and anemia. The constant hunger and focus on her body also seemed to affect her mental state, contributing to her periods of melancholy and her reclusive nature in her later years. Cece's eating habits were an extreme and private version of a broader social pressure. While most Victorian women didn't have a steak press in their palace, the idea of a delicate appetite was very much in vogue. A lady was not supposed to eat with gusto. At public dinners, it was common for women to eat very little, just picking at their food. Today, we have a much more sophisticated, though still often troubled, understanding of diet and nutrition. The concept of wellness emphasizes nourishing the body with a balanced diet of whole foods. Cece's diets look, to our modern eyes, like a form of self-starvation. They were not sustainable, not healthy, and were driven by a psychological obsession rather than a desire for well-being. The story of her diet is a sad one. It shows a woman with immense privilege who was nonetheless trapped by a relentless and punishing beauty standard, one that she largely imposed on herself. It makes you grateful for the modern emphasis on nutrition, strength, and fueling your body, rather than starving it into a fashionable shape. Number 5, would you bathe in milk and strawberries? Empress Eugenie, the wife of Napoleon III of France, was said to maintain her complexion by taking baths in milk. Another prominent beauty of the era, the courtesan Cora Pearl, was famous for bathing in champagne. While these were luxurious extremes, the Victorian era saw a rise in beauty baths using ingredients like milk, honey, bran, and even strawberries. The simple act of bathing for cleanliness was becoming more common in the Victorian era, but for the wealthy, a bath could also be an elaborate beauty treatment. The idea of using food and drink items in the bath was based on the belief that their beneficial properties could be absorbed through the skin. Milk baths are perhaps the most famous example. The practice is ancient, often associated with Cleopatra. In the 19th century, it was revived as a luxury treatment. The lactic acid in milk is a gentle alpha-hydroxy acid AHA, which helps to exfoliate the skin, leaving it feeling softer and smoother. The fats and proteins in milk are also moisturizing. An empress like Eugenie would have had her maids pour several gallons of fresh milk into her tub. It was a decadent way to get a full-body skin treatment. Honey was another popular bath additive. Honey is a natural humectant, meaning it draws moisture into the skin. It also has natural antibacterial properties. A few cups of honey dissolved in a warm bath would leave the skin feeling hydrated and soft. For a less sticky option, women would use bran or oatmeal. They would place a few handfuls of bran or rolled oats into a muslin bag and let it steep in the bath water, like a giant tea bag. The starches in the oats create a soothing, milky liquid that can calm irritated or dry skin. This is a remedy that is still recommended today for conditions like eczema. Some beauty recipes even called for strawberries. The fruit would be crushed and added to the bath water, like the veal and strawberry face mask used by Cece. The idea was that the acids and vitamins in the strawberries would brighten and tone the skin. One can only imagine the mess this would create. These beauty baths were a sign of extreme luxury. Milk, honey, and fresh fruit were valuable commodities. To use them for bathing rather than for eating was a conspicuous display of wealth. Cora Pearl's infamous champagne baths, where she would allegedly have dozens of bottles of champagne poured into a custom-made bathtub, were the ultimate publicity stunt, cementing her reputation for extravagant decadence. While Queen Victoria herself was more pragmatic and less focused on such lavish routines, the culture of the beauty bath was widespread in the aristocratic circles she moved in. It was part of a broader interest in natural remedies and the belief in the beautifying powers of ingredients found in the kitchen. Today, we have continued this tradition, but in a much more convenient and less wasteful form. We have bath bombs, bath oils, and bubble baths that are filled with skin-loving ingredients. Many products are inspired by these Victorian practices. You can easily find a milk and honey bath soak or an oatmeal-based bath product. The difference is that our products are formulated for stability and efficacy. We've extracted the beneficial components, the lactic acid, the moisturizing lipids, the soothing compounds, and put them into a concentrated, easy-to-use form. The Victorian beauty bath is a great example of how old world remedies can have a basis in real science. But it also highlights the sheer extravagance and impracticality of their methods. It makes you grateful that you can get the skin softening benefits of a milk bath from a few scoops of a powder, rather than having to empty your refrigerator into your tub. Number 4, how did you protect your skin when sunscreen didn't exist? In the Victorian era, a tan was a clear sign that you were a member of the working class. To maintain their fashionable, pale complexions, aristocratic women would go to extreme lengths to avoid the sun. This involved a daily routine of using parasols, wearing large bonnets, veils, and long gloves. They essentially lived their lives in a self-created bubble of shade. The fear of the sun, or heliophobia, among the Victorian upper classes was not about health concerns like skin cancer. It was purely about aesthetics and social status. Pale skin was the ultimate symbol of a life of leisure. It meant you didn't have to toil in the fields or walk long distances outdoors. You were a delicate creature who lived indoors, protected from the elements. This ideal dictated a woman's entire wardrobe and daily routine. No respectable lady would leave the house without a formidable array of sun-blocking accessories. The parasol was the most important of these. It was a small, portable umbrella, often beautifully decorated with lace and fringe, designed specifically to block the sun's rays. A woman would carry it with her at all times when outdoors, carefully angling it to keep her face and neck in constant shade. Headwear was also crucial. Bonnets in the Victorian era were often very large, with wide brims that projected forward, effectively shielding the face from the sun. Many bonnets also had veils attached, which could be worn down over the face for an extra layer of protection. These veils, often made of fine gauze or net, also added an air of mystery and modesty. Clothing was designed to cover as much skin as possible. Dresses had long sleeves and high necklines, and even with long sleeves, a lady would always wear gloves when she went out. This ensured that her hands remained as pale as her face. This routine of avoidance meant that many women lived in a state of perpetual twilight. They would move from their drawing rooms to their carriages to their social calls, all while minimizing their exposure to direct sunlight. A day at the beach was not about sunbathing. It was about sitting under a large tent or umbrella, fully clothed, to enjoy the sea air. This lifestyle, while it did protect them from UV damage and premature aging, had its own health consequences. The lack of sunlight could lead to vitamin D deficiency, which can cause bone problems and affect mood. The constant covering and indoor living may have contributed to the delicate and frail health that was so often associated with women of the era. This obsession with paleness was embodied by all the royal women of the time. Queen Victoria, Empress Sisi, Empress Eugenie, all are depicted in portraits and early photographs with flawless white skin. This was the standard they set, and the one that society women everywhere tried to emulate. Today, our relationship with the sun is more complex. We know that some sun exposure is necessary for vitamin D production, but we are also acutely aware of the risks of skin cancer and photoaging. Our solution is not total avoidance, but selective protection. The invention of sunscreen has revolutionized our ability to enjoy the outdoors safely. We can now go for a walk, play a sport, or sit on a beach without having to hide under a mountain of clothing. We can protect our skin with a simple application of a high SPF lotion. Our beauty ideal has also flipped. A light, healthy-looking tan is now often seen as a sign of health and leisure, the very thing the Victorians were so desperate to avoid. The Victorian routine of sun avoidance is a powerful example of how a single beauty standard can completely shape a person's lifestyle. It dictated what they wore, where they went, and how they moved through the world. It makes you incredibly grateful for the scientific breakthrough of sunscreen and the freedom it gives us to live in the light. Number 3, was there a right way to frown? Victorian beauty manuals and guides for young ladies often contained advice not just on skincare, but on behavior. Women were counseled to avoid excessive smiling, laughing, or frowning, as it was believed that these facial expressions would lead to unsightly wrinkles. To maintain a smooth, serene complexion, a woman was supposed to cultivate a placid, neutral expression. This goes beyond a simple beauty routine and into the realm of physical self-control. The Victorians were very interested in phrenology and physiognomy, the pseudosciences of judging a person's character from their facial features and skull shape. A person's face was seen as a map of their moral character. A smooth, unlined face was associated with a calm, virtuous, and well-behaved disposition. Wrinkles, on the other hand, could be interpreted as a sign of a life filled with worry, excessive emotion, or even moral failings. To avoid these dreaded lines, women were trained from a young age to control their faces. A loud, boisterous laugh was considered unladylike. A deep, worried frown was a sign of a troubled mind. A wide, toothy grin was seen as vulgar. The ideal was a gentle, serene, and almost blank expression. Think of the portraits of Queen Victoria in her later years. Her expression is famously unsmiling and stoic. While this was partly due to her long period of mourning for Prince Albert, it also fit perfectly with the Victorian ideal of dignified restraint. This facial training was a constant, all-day beauty routine. A woman had to be conscious of her expressions at all times. When she felt like laughing, she might restrain it to a demure smile. When she felt like crying, she would try to do so without scrunching up her face. It was a form of emotional and physical discipline, all in the service of preventing wrinkles. Some took this a step further with physical devices. The late 19th century saw the invention of the first anti-wrinkle patches, sometimes called frowners. These were small pieces of adhesive paper or fabric that a woman would stick onto her forehead or between her eyebrows before going to sleep. The idea was that the patch would physically prevent her from frowning or furrowing her brow in her sleep. These are the direct ancestors of the anti-wrinkle patches that are still sold today. This focus on preventing expression lines shows a fundamental misunderstanding of skin biology. While repeated expressions do contribute to wrinkles over time, the primary causes of aging are sun damage and the natural loss of collagen and elastin. But in an era without that scientific knowledge, controlling one's facial muscles seemed like a logical preventative measure. It also speaks to the restrictive social roles of women. The ideal woman was supposed to be passive, calm, and agreeable. An expressive face might be seen as a sign of a rebellious or overly emotional nature. So, the beauty ideal of a smooth face reinforced the social ideal of a placid woman. Today, we have a very different attitude. We value authenticity and expressiveness. A face that shows a life of laughter and emotion is often seen as beautiful and full of character. We are encouraged to smile, to laugh, and to express our feelings openly. For wrinkle prevention, we rely on science, not suppression. We use sunscreen to prevent UV damage. We use products with retinol and peptides to boost collagen production. And for those who want a more direct approach, there is Botox, which works by temporarily relaxing the very muscles that the Victorians were trying to control through sheer willpower. In a way, Botox is the high-tech solution to the very same problem the frowners were trying to solve. The Victorian practice of face control is a fascinating and slightly chilling example of how beauty standards can seek to police not just a woman's appearance, but her very emotions. It makes you grateful for the freedom to laugh as loudly as you want without worrying that it's ruining your face. Number 2, did the Queen use carbolic soap? Unlike many of her contemporaries who were obsessed with elaborate and often dangerous beauty concoctions, Queen Victoria was a champion of something much simpler: cleanliness. She was a strong believer in the importance of hygiene and was an early adopter of carbolic soap, a strong antiseptic soap developed in the 1860s. Her routine was less about artifice and more about scrubbing away dirt and germs. In an era of lead powders and arsenic wafers, Queen Victoria's beauty routine was refreshingly pragmatic and grounded in the emerging scientific understanding of hygiene. The mid-19th century was a time of great progress in public health, with figures like Florence Nightingale and Joseph Lister pioneering antiseptic practices. The idea that invisible germs could cause disease was revolutionary, and it began to filter into personal care. Carbolic soap was a key product of this new era. It was invented by Dr. Joseph Lister, who used carbolic acid phenol as an antiseptic to sterilize surgical instruments and clean wounds, dramatically reducing deaths from infection. The soap company Pears, and later others, incorporated carbolic acid into their soaps, marketing them to the public as a way to prevent disease and ensure thorough cleanliness. The soap had a distinctive medicinal smell and was a reddish-brown color. It was a powerful disinfectant and deodorant. Queen Victoria, who was a great supporter of scientific and medical advancements, gave carbolic soap her royal warrant. This was a huge endorsement, and it helped to popularize the soap throughout the British Empire. Her daily routine was likely quite simple. Instead of cleansing with cold creams, she would have used soap and water. Her regular baths would have been for cleanliness, not for soaking in milk or honey. This focus on hygiene was a core part of her identity as a modern monarch. She and Prince Albert were famously concerned with sanitation, and they oversaw major plumbing and sewer upgrades at Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle. This cult of cleanliness was a departure from the beauty standards of the French court, which had historically emphasized perfume and powder to mask odors rather than soap and water to remove them. Victoria's approach was very British practical, no nonsense, and based on principles of health and order. Of course, she still adhered to some of the beauty standards of her time. She valued pale skin and would have protected herself from the sun. But her foundational routine was not about layering on cosmetics. It was about being scrupulously clean. This doesn't mean carbolic soap was perfect. It was very harsh by modern standards. Carbolic acid can be irritating to the skin, especially with frequent use. It would have stripped the skin of its natural oils, leaving it dry and tight. It was a far cry from the gentle pH-balanced moisturizing cleansers we have today. But at the time, in a world where body odor was common and infectious diseases were a constant threat, its powerful antiseptic properties were seen as a miracle. Queen Victoria's simple soap and water routine provides a stark contrast to the extreme and dangerous practices of some of her royal contemporaries, like Empress Sisi. It shows that there was not one single Victorian approach to beauty. Victoria's routine was rooted in a very different set of values: health, modernity, and a certain moral uprightness associated with being clean. You know, it's a reminder that sometimes the most effective beauty routine is the simplest one. And while we wouldn't want to use harsh carbolic soap on our faces today, the principle that Queen Victoria championed, that a clean and healthy body is the foundation of beauty role, is one that has stood the test of time. It makes you grateful for the gentle, effective cleansers we have now, which allow us to achieve that same goal without stripping our skin in the process. Number one, what price is too high for beauty? One of the most elaborate routines belonged not to a queen, but to the socialites who followed their trends. It was the full day preparation for a grand ball. It could start in the morning with a beauty bath, followed by hours of hairstyling. In the afternoon, a woman would rest with cucumber slices on her eyes to reduce puffiness. Then came the corseting, the multi-layered dressing, and finally, the secret, careful application of powders, subtle rouges, and eyebrow darkeners. It was a day-long, multi-stage process of construction, all for a single evening's appearance. This final routine is not about a single strange ingredient, but about the sheer cumulative effort. It brings together all the elements we've discussed into one epic performance of Victorian femininity. Let's walk through the day of a wealthy woman preparing for a major social event like a ball hosted by the queen herself. The morning would begin not with a rush, but with a slow, deliberate process of beautification. The first step might be a special bath, perhaps a milk bath for softness or a bran bath to soothe the skin. After the bath, she would apply a body lotion, perhaps scented with her signature fragrance. Then came the hairdresser. This was not a quick blow dry. The elaborate hairstyles of the Victorian era, with their complex braids, curls, and updos, could take hours to create. False hair pieces or rats were often used to add volume. The whole structure would be pinned and pomaded into place. This process was so long that it had to be done in the middle of the day. After the hair was set, it was time to rest and prepare the face. A woman might lie down in a darkened room with a cloth soaked in rose water over her forehead to prevent a headache. This was also the time for targeted treatments. Slices of raw cucumber or potato on the eyes were a common remedy to reduce swelling and dark circles. A light facial massage with almond oil might be performed to improve circulation and give the skin a glow. As evening approached, the real construction began. The first layer was the undergarments, the chemise, the drawers, and then the most critical piece, the corset. This would be laced by a maid, pulled tighter and tighter until the desired 18-inch waist was achieved. Over the corset came the corset cover, then the huge crinoline or bustle to create the fashionable silhouette, and multiple petticoats. Finally, the dress itself would be lowered over her head. This was often a heavy, elaborate garment made of silk or satin, decorated with lace, ribbons, and beads. Getting into the dress was a two-person job. The very last step was the face. This had to be done after dressing to avoid smudging. With great care, she would apply a thin layer of white powder, perhaps the safe rice powder, or perhaps the dangerous lead-based bloom of youth. A subtle touch of rouge, made from carmine, would be dabbed on the cheeks. Her eyebrows would be darkened with a homemade soot-based pomade. A final spritz of perfume on her handkerchief and gloves, and she was ready. This entire process could take 6 to 8 hours. And it was a day of passive endurance. Being beautified was her job. The result was a stunning, artificial creation, a woman transformed into a work of art, barely able to breathe, sit, or eat, but perfectly embodying the ideals of her time. This routine is the ultimate answer to the question of what price women were willing to pay. They paid with their time, spending entire days on their appearance. They paid with their comfort, encased in rigid corsets and heavy clothes, and sometimes, as we've seen, they paid with their health, using poisons and dangerous chemicals to achieve the right look. When we look back at these 19 strange and elaborate routines, from eating arsenic to sleeping in meat masks, we see a world of incredible pressure. The lives of royal and aristocratic women were lived on public display, and their beauty was their primary asset. They were trapped in a gilded cage of expectations, and they used the limited tools and knowledge of their time to meet them. It makes you profoundly grateful for the world we live in now. We have science, safety, and choice. We have products that are effective and non-toxic. We have the freedom to choose our own look, whether it's natural or glamorous. And most importantly, we have the knowledge to understand that true beauty is not about achieving a single, punishing ideal, but about health, well-being, and the freedom to be ourselves. The greatest luxury we have, which these Victorian queens never did, is the luxury of not having to suffer for our beauty.